All right, seeing as that it's 6:30, we'll call the meeting to order. City of Walker Planning Commission meeting for July 20th. First thing to do is review the meeting minutes from July 6th.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Okay, motion to approve and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the minutes pass. The next item on the agenda is for general public comment. This is for the general public to make a comment on anything to the Planning Commission. We would ask that you don't make any comments on the items that are on the agenda, as we'll have opportunity. Each one of these has a public hearing for those. So, anything for general public comment? All right, seeing as there's none, we'll move into the agenda items. The first agenda item is case number 22-020, and this is a public hearing also. It's final area site plan for Turner North Phase, 2500 Turner Avenue Northwest and 2621 West River Drive Northwest. Tricia?
Thank you, Jason. So we recently had the folks from Visser Brothers with us for a rezone request of the former Deltaplex site, and the rezoning was approved at the last City Commission meeting, and so they've kind of timed this just right, so that now that they're applying for FASP for phase 1, they're able to get the approval without having to wait for the rezoning to take place. So we are looking at a final area site plan for phase 1 of Turner North. And the action requested by the Planning Commission is to grant approval with or without conditions, tabling, or denial of the request. And the addresses associated with this request are 2500 Turner and 2621 West River Drive. This is approximately 7 acres. It's now zoned IPUD, future land use is enterprise, and this is on the north side of West River Drive at the Turner Avenue, West River Drive intersection. And it looks like we have Greg Bull with us tonight to represent the applicant. So I'm just going to go through some of the proposed improvements. We went through most of these during the PASP phase of review, and now we're dialing it in with more specifics. And I'm just going to go through each of those major highlights for improvements for phase 1. So phase 1 consists of the renovation of the existing building that's been there, and they're creating 3 tenant suites containing warehousing and associated office spaces. They're adding 2 loading docks for tenant 1 and then 1 loading dock for tenant 2. They're adding the landscaping along the West River Drive and hillside frontages. Plus they are adding some landscaped islands in the existing parking lot. They're proposing 14 semi-truck parking spaces and 124 standard parking spaces. This includes ADA spaces. Some of this 124 includes some of the existing parking that's being preserved. They're also adding sidewalks along West River Drive and hillside frontages per the master plan to fill in those sidewalk gaps in the sidewalk improvement zone. Tenant 2 will have an outdoor storage area for the future tenant, and it's proposed to have some fencing to screen and then also gated access. So this is the site plan associated with phase 1. So just pointing out a couple of things that I just listed. This is where the outdoor storage area is proposed, and they're aware that it can't exceed, the stacking of any equipment and materials can't exceed the height of the fence. And they'll have a gate here to enclose this area. Here's one of the loading docks, here's the other one, and then they've got one over here. These are the semi-trailer parking spaces retrofitted into the existing pavement there. They're preserving some of this existing parking, and they are reluctantly adding some parking lot islands. And so this is a really straightforward project. My comments are pretty brief. I am recommending that the Planning Commission approve the FASP for Turner North, subject to these 7 conditions. I'm just going to point out a couple of fixes that we'll want to see on the revised plans that should be submitted, which is also one of the conditions. We'll need updated parking calculations. The PASP showed some concept parking calculations. Now that they have it figured out and know where and how many parking spaces, we'll just need that added to that sheet, the parking calculations. There's also a discrepancy with the note section of the landscape plan, and it shows 4 parking lot it shows 4 parking lot island, or no, it says 1 tree, and then, but the plan itself shows 4 trees. So we just would like him to revise the plan to reflect the actual number of trees there. And then the other thing I would like to point out is that the applicant has to apply for a parcel combination of parcels A and C before we issue any building permits, and that's something that can easily be done through our assessing office. And the other conditions are just standard conditions that I typically add to approvals for FASP. And that's it for me.
Okay, thanks, Tricia. Any questions for Tricia at this point? Seeing as there is none, Scott, do you have a report for us?
2 simple items from us. We want to make sure that we get the back of walk elevations shown on that sidewalk. If you've been out there, you know it's a little tricky, the elevations, especially on the west side. So if they want to like lower the sidewalk, for example, and have it work with the drainage a little bit better, that's fine. We just have to know in advance what those elevations are. And also the parking aisle in the southeast, or really on this picture, it's the bottom. If those are new stripes, then they need to make sure that their center aisle is 25 feet. What we generally use is the parking spot plus the aisle plus the other parking spot has to be 61 feet per the ordinance, and what they have is 60 feet. So they need to find 1 more foot unless it's existing, and then it's kind of an existing non-conforming issue. That's it.
All right, thanks, Scott. Any questions for Scott at this point? Seeing as there is none, would the applicant come up and present, please? Please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. I'm Greg Ball with Visser Brothers, and I don't have a lot to add to that. Last time I added a lot, and the newspaper quoted me, and I sounded really stupid. So I'm just going to keep it quiet, and if you have questions, I'd be happy to answer. It's pretty self-explanatory, I think. So.
Any initial questions for the applicant? Okay, seeing that this is a public hearing, thanks, Greg.
I'll make a motion to open the public hearing.
Support.
All right, motion in and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The public hearing's open. Anyone in the audience that would like to make any comments, questions, statements? Please come up to the podium. State your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, my name's Ryan Vandersteeg. I live at 2675 Hillside Drive, just to the west of the property. And I was just curious as to the type of buffering that they're going to use, just kind of for like noise concerns and this and that. It's kind of already a little bit noisy there, which is, I mean, perfectly fine, livable, because it's in industrial area. So I was just curious. I think what I read today was that what's required is type C buffering, but that's not going to be easy, I guess. So is I think according to that, I think it says A zoning. Is that what that is for the buffering on the west side there? Is that what that says?
Do you want me to respond?
Please.
Okay. So I think you read probably the applicant narrative that said it would be impossible with the spacing to get that many trees in that amount of frontage. So what they're showing here, you can see that on this plan here, they're showing, I think it's, I don't know the exact number. It's like 30 some evergreens. But so with the buffer, this is a planned unit development, and that allows us to be able to have some flexibility with the buffer. So when you look in our landscaping section of our ordinance, it gives requirements for different zoning districts that abut residential. So like what the buffer width is, how many trees and shrubs per lineal foot, when it's like residential against industrial, residential against commercial, commercial against industrial, all those different combinations. And so we have the flexibility to say, plant as many trees as you can possibly fit there. Just make sure we have a number to hold you to. And so that's essentially what they've done there. And so we're satisfied with it. If you have some additional concerns with wanting them to add more landscaping, or more trees in certain areas, I'm sure that's something that we can work out after the Planning Commission meeting. I have a recommended condition of approval that asks the Planning Commission to allow staff to work with the applicant on any changes to the approved landscape plan. So if that's something that you and the applicant wanted to discuss and maybe figure out, probably closer, like during the construction process, or like when they're planting, which I would assume would be maybe in the fall, because it's kind of getting too late in the summer to do it now. And just work as that you'd like to see more plantings in, and we can have them put it on the plan.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I mean, as far as buffering goes, if trees suffice, I suppose. Yeah, just with like them adding the loading docks and this and that, that was just my kind of main concern, because I'm kind of up in the hill and that's all you can see. I understand what they're trying to do, and it's great. But yeah, it just was, I guess my curiosity was what type of buffering would be used. So I suppose it's just trees and fence.
Trees, they're not proposing a fence on the hillside frontage, but if it makes you feel any better, they're not doing any truck maneuvering on the back side of the building, which is hillside. All of their loading areas, with the exception of the somewhat northeastern facing side of the building, will be in that main West River Drive frontage.
Okay. All right. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, doesn't appear to have anyone else.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
All right, we have a motion to close the public hearing and supported. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, the public hearing is closed. Commission members, any comments, questions on this? And/or I'll entertain a motion.
Nice to see a project with so few items outstanding that need to be addressed. Anyone else have anything? Otherwise, I can jump right into a motion. All right, for case 22-020, I will make a motion to approve the final area site plan for Phase 1 of Turner North, located at 2500 Turner Avenue Northwest and 2621 West River Drive Northwest, per the plan set last revision dated 6/29/2022, subject to the following conditions. The applicant shall address all the items outlined in the city engineer's report dated 7/12/22. The applicant shall provide updated parking calculations to reflect the proposed number of parking spaces associated with Phase 1. The applicant shall revise the notes section of the landscape plan to show 4 parking lot island trees. Any changes to the approved landscape plan shall be reviewed and approved by staff prior to the issuance of building occupancy. The applicant shall apply for a parcel combination of parcels A and C prior to the issuance of any building permits associated with phase one. The applicant may be required to submit a financial guarantee in the form of a letter of credit, surety bond, or cash deposit to ensure the quality completion of exterior site-related items, such as landscaping and parking lot striping, if occupancy of the building is requested prior to the quality completion of these items. And the applicant shall provide 3 sealed sets of civil engineered plans incorporating the recommended revisions to the Community Development Department prior to applying for a final area site plan review for phase one of the development. Findings of fact from section 94-2137E. The final area site plan meets the standards contained in section 94-213. The final area site plan is in substantial compliance with the previously approved Turner North PASP. The FASP complies with the uses permitted by the Turner North IPUD district and any prohibitions of specific uses by the Planning Commission.
All right, we have a motion by Steve. Do we have any comment or support?
Support.
Support by Pat. Any other comments? All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion passes. Thank you. All right, next on the agenda is case number 22-018. This also is a public hearing. This is for special exemption use, site plan review, a new self-serve fuel management system for Pacific Pride, 3677 3 Mile Road. Tricia, would you start us off, please?
Thank you, Jason. So this is a special exception use request with also site plan review. The property address, as Jason mentioned, is 3677 3 Mile Road, and this is the site of Dykstra Excavating. And the lot size of the subject site is 1.8 acres, and that's to be split from the main Dykstra Excavating parcel. The zoning district is light industry. Future land use designation is business with a community character designation of enterprise. The general location of the project site is on the north side of 3 Mile Road, just east of the 3 Mile Fruit Ridge Avenue intersection. And we have been working with Brad VanManen from Pacific Pride, and Adam Feenstra, who I don't believe is here tonight, we have Randy Feenstra in his place, from Feenstra Associates. So just a little bit of background. The subject site is, like I said, the site of Jack Dykstra Excavating. It's a pretty large space, and they recently expressed some interest in splitting off a piece of their property. They had some interest from Pacific Pride. So the plan is to split off 1.8 acres for the Pacific Pride operation, if approved. You might already know that the Pacific Pride self-serve fueling station in Walker is existing across the street behind that marathon station. And so it's my understanding that the new site would replace the existing location, and the plan is to be open 24 hours a day. So just to give you some perspective of where we're talking about here, this whole piece is the Jack Dykstra Excavating site. They've got some space over here that they're interested in splitting off for Pacific Pride. This is the existing location, which I mentioned would be replaced by the new location if approved. This is the site plan. You can see that there is some shared access here. This property line is proposed to go right down the middle of this driveway. This driveway is, this is the existing driveway, which is proposed to be widened to be a full service shared driveway here. And the other driveway is also a shared cross access with the parcel to the west, which is owned by Triangle and Associates. And so there's a private easement in place for the shared use of this driveway as well. And the improvements are proposed to touch this existing driveway. And then there's a space out front for future development if that ever takes place. So when we look at the special exception use, we've got the series of criteria that I've listed in my report from section 94-250. Most of these criteria are essentially meant to determine whether or not there would be a negative impact of the use on the surrounding properties. It's staff's determination that all of these criteria have been met. Jumping into the site plan review, what they're proposing as part of the Pacific Pride self-service fuel station is underground fueling tanks, landscaping, sidewalks, which are not there currently, stormwater management, 6 double-sided fueling kiosks under the canopy, all self-serve. And then they're proposing some site circulation, and as I mentioned, they've got use of shared driveways with cross-access easements, and they are working with the neighbor at Triangle and Associates to keep semi-trucks from going in their shared driveway, and they should exit through the east driveway. They're also proposing some signage. So, in my opinion, this is a pretty straightforward project. Again, we've received a little bit of correspondence after the packet was published from the neighbor at Triangle Associates, and I forwarded their comments to you. It seems like there is some concern with stormwater detention not being sized appropriately for whether or not if in the future Triangle decides to expand their operation, and should they need additional volume in their detention basin. I think they essentially want to make sure that Pacific Pride isn't taking all that volume. But there's a private easement there, and I am thinking that Scott is going to speak to that a little bit. A lot of the emails correspondence that we got was later this afternoon, so some of it he may not have even seen yet. And so, you know, some of the concerns expressed about the driveway, the shared driveway access, just a reminder that some of those things are private, to be worked out between property owners, and you know, when there's a private shared access easement in place, the terms of those easements is enforceable by the property owners. So the city doesn't necessarily enforce those private easement requirements. So I've got the 4 conditions here. These are all pretty standard. Any changes to the approved landscape plan, I'm asking that the Planning Commission allow the applicant to work with staff on review and approval of any changes. We need 3 sealed sets before they can apply for a building permit, or before we can issue a building permit. Depending on what time of the year the project is under construction, we may ask for a financial guarantee to secure landscaping and other exterior site-related improvements get completed. And then, of course, the applicant shall address all the items outlined in the city engineer's report. And that is it for me, unless you have any questions.
All right, thank you, Tricia. Any questions for Tricia at this point? Seeing as there is none, Scott?
Well, a few more items from us. The plan's a little bit light on the detail, so we've a couple of items here to discuss. We had a hard time understanding the circulation. It does look like that east lane is 2-way, so we didn't know if it's kind of a free-for-all. You can jump into the fuel pumps early, or you can go around to the back. That certainly has an impact on the truck turning templates, and and the friction between, you know, these big vehicles that come in here. And we want to make sure that's all going to fit. So again, truck turning templates are important once we can figure out that pattern. We'd also like to see some dimensions between the aisles there. I couldn't tell if they're purposely oddly spaced, or if that's an accident or what. So we want to tie that down so that we know what those distances are and have a good handle on that. Also noted that the entrance to the Jack Dykstra site to the east, it looks like that driveway is connected, but if it's connected, there's no radii around there. It's kind of like just a straight-in connection, and with the kind of vehicles that use that site, you want to have a nice radius to get in and out of there. So we need that clarified. And there's 3 catch basins shown on the south end of the fuel aisles. And those look like they have an oil grit separator or some kind of an oil separator, and they go to the sanitary sewer, which is that red line on the west side of the site there. And that's a little bit odd, and so we sent that to Grand Rapids and said we're a little bit concerned here because, well, first of all, we didn't have a lot of detail knowing if there's a canopy, what's the limit of the canopy, you know, all those kinds of things. Grand Rapids reviewed it and said, I think their exact words were, that's a hard no. So we've got to figure that out. And there may be a canopy, perhaps this is just completely located underneath there, but they have a hard time with any surface parking lot area getting into the sanitary sewer because it's just not sized for it. That should be going to the storm sewer, so there's some work to do there. Something that wasn't written in my report, there's been a little bit of a concern from the neighbor. They've had some conversations about drainage and truck patterns. I think some of those concerns are concerns for them to work out between themselves with the shared driveway and with the easement on the stormwater. You know, we're not really good at mediating issues like that, especially at the last minute. So I think it's up to them. If it becomes contentious, they can hire professionals to help them with that. But we did not step in and try to moderate a session with them. So you may hear some concerns about that. That is it.
All right, thanks, Scott. Any questions for Scott at this point? Seeing as there is none, would the applicant like to come up and present to us, please? Please state your name and address for the record.
Brad VanManen, VanManen Petroleum Group, but representing our division Refined Marketers, O-305 Lake Michigan Drive, Grand Rapids, 49534. So, thank you. Appreciate the thorough report. We have been operating the site across the street for some time. We are a tenant there. The folks that own the Marathon gas station in the front, we are a tenant in the back and have the desire to expand our site, make for a few more fueling lanes and some improvements. Also get up to date on a lot of the latest things. One of the diesel exhaust fluid will be added as a distribution point. Also looking at working with some of those things that Mr. Connors had pointed out. I did send, and I know it was kind of late, I did send some things. Would you like me to go over a couple of those? There was 5 points, I believe, that Mr. Connors put forward. Is that something you'd like me to go over at this point?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, they were having a hard time understanding the circulation pattern of the trucks. I think initially we didn't have the arrows in the right spot. Now if I demonstrate it with this, you guys probably aren't able to see this screen, right?
No, we won't be able to see that.
Sure. So, you were gonna put that, could you put the site plan back up, please? You have the mouse now. Oh, I have the mouse, so I must have did something.
Scroll back.
Scroll it?
Yeah, all the way.
Oh, wait, right here. Okay, so, this is the current drive entering, where Dykstra enters their parcel for their heavy equipment. Our plan is to make this our main, entrance and also exit, especially for the big trucks. When we bought this property from Dykstra, there is currently a 60-foot easement that Mr. Connors spoke to between Triangle and our parcel. But what we're looking at, during our preliminary site plan review, we had a lot of head nods coming from the police, fire, and DPW. I don't like putting, it gets very difficult putting big trucks out on this area so close to the light at Fruit Ridge. So if we can get them away from the light, it's safer both getting in and getting out of the site. So our idea was to put a large entrance down here, 3 lanes basically, an ingress lane. The trucks would come down here, go all the way to the back of the property. We have turning templates, and I have those with me here. They'll come right around here and they'll hit this fueling lane, and this fueling lane. That is where the diesel will be located, in those 3, primarily those 3 fueling lanes. Semis, straight trucks, bus, City of Walker, DPW, snowplows, things like that will primarily be right here. Exiting, they'll be able to come right out here, have a very wide access point here, exiting, and they'll be able to pick their lane to either do a left-hand turn onto 3 Mile or a right-hand on 3 Mile Road. Over here with the existing, I want to talk a little bit about this traffic pattern as well. We had looked at a couple things to, we have, this is, I said, a 60-foot easement here. Happens to be that the road is built, about a 25-foot road here. This is the property line, so it's entirely on Triangle's property. And that's where a few of the concerns came up. I had met with Craig Datema from Triangle just prior to them getting the stuff from the City of Walker, the notifications. And we went over a couple of things, and he was concerned with, truck access. And I explained to him that we do not want to see semis, we do not want to see school buses, we do not want to see straight trucks coming in here. We've purposely put the gasoline on this side of the canopy. So the traffic flow, if a Walker City police cruiser, lawn maintenance vehicle, a pickup or so, were to come in this drive, they could come in here, enter at this first one, and pick from 2 islands to use for gasoline. When they're finished their fueling, they'll come back here, and they can exit out here if it's deemed safer for them. We had agreed to put, initially our project showed 2 signs, one about here and one about here, just strictly a directional sign that would say no semis. Mr. Datema has requested that we just put one here. And so we're certainly willing to do that. He's also asked that we put a directional sign here, just pointing his entrance, and then on the back side, exit or entrance only, and pointing to the exit back here, so probably putting a sign back here. We'll do our best to get traffic flow like that, but one of the things we find with the small cars and all this room, cruisers, cars, pickups, it depends what side their fueling point's on. They may find coming in here and exiting here or exiting here may be good as well. So those are a couple things. Just be very honest with you, Mr. Datum had asked that if we could close this in. You know, we do have a mutual access to this road, asked if we could make this narrower. We're considering that, but a lot of the people I've talked to we've built a lot of these sites, and we know that if we try to restrict that down, we're just gonna get people going over the lawns, making tighter turns. So that's it from as far as Mr. Connor's first point with the traffic flow. And the templates, I do have, and when I run the mouse back up, I do have 3 sets of the turning templates here for you as well. We've done the turning templates for the big trucks to hit these islands, entering here again, going to the back. And then we've also done templates here for circulation in the gas.
Sewer line there also?
Sure. These are addressing also the 3 catch basins that Mr. Connor has referenced. I like to think our company is always going above and beyond with this particular aspect of our sites. The state doesn't require that we put anything under our canopies for collection or for doing anything different. For years, we have put in oil water separators. The nature of what we do, being unattended, commercial vehicles, they come in if there's some oil drips here and there, and if rain comes in when a vehicle drives under our canopy, where does that water go? It's going to pick up some of those hydrocarbons, and it's just going to go down into the storm sewer, just like any gas station. What we have engineered our sites to do is to pick those 3 catch basins that you see right here, 1, 2, 3, are under a canopy. They do not take any water from the canopy roof. The canopy roof will drain into the catch basin or the stormwater system. So we're just picking the stuff up underneath the canopy. It's going through, right here we have an oil water separator. This is an engineered system. It's very common in our industry. Oil will float on top of water. It has a diffuser in there that basically helps to break the hydrocarbon from the water. And then so the water that's going out is going to the sanitary. I can understand what you mentioned, Mr. Connors, with the city of Grand Rapids, because every place we've gone, they've wanted us to hook up to the sanitary, except city of Grand Rapids. We had the last site we did downtown Grand Rapids, we had gone round and round with a few things. We ended up hooking it up to our storm sewer system, and that's fine. I'm okay with that. But it's not unlike a public parking structure that you would see, say, in downtown Grand Rapids, multi-level. The top floor of that parking structure, the water that rains on that top floor goes into the storm sewer. The subsequent floors, where you're going to have a gap where a wet car comes in and has water is going to be brought in, or it enters in through the sides, that typically all goes through a sanitary. So we are open to working with engineering either way they want to go.
Okay, thank you.
With regards to the islands, these 3 islands right here, 1, 2, and 3, these are our primary diesel islands. We currently operate 21 of these sites, and a 17-foot island between center to center is a very generous for a semi-truck to get in and out of. The next one over here is a little bit narrower. This will have a gas pump and a small nozzle diesel for a diesel pickup or a diesel car. We don't, by making it 14 feet, we'll make it a little tight for a semi to get in there. We don't want a semi to go in there. This range right here, being 24 feet wide, there could be a car parked right here, getting gas, and there still could be a car parked here getting gas. So that's why we have the differential in the lanes. But the offset to the edge of the canopy on either side is 8 foot. And I believe we put those on the new drawing. I think Adam did put them on one of the updates that we sent over. But 8 foot on the sides, this is a 24 foot. The next one's 14, and then we have 3 lanes at 17 feet. The driveway here at the front with access to Jack Dykstra's office parking lot, we have updated this on the plan, and they are vacating this drive right here. And I should also say the reason this is two-way in here, this will be Dykstra's primary entrance and egress to their site. They plan on coming off back here, right to the gravel. Not exactly sure where they're going to do that yet, but we're pretty sure it's going to be right off the backside. And then that way they'll be able to have a truck. If they need to exit, when they exit, they'll exit right down there. I believe those were the 5 things.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any questions for the applicant at this time?
I'm sitting here looking at you, and I think maybe I was your doctor when you were a little kid. Is that right, possibly?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I have a couple nephews, maybe.
Was Garrett VanManen, was he the grandfather?
Garrett, no, Howard was my grandfather.
Who was the one that used to deliver the oil from Standard Oil?
Gerald, that's my
Okay.
dad.
That's what?
That's my dad.
Okay, okay, okay.
Don't establish too close of a connection, or you'll have to sit out there and you'll be sure.
Thanks, Joe.
A lot of connections around this area.
Yeah.
Long time.
That was a very thorough evaluation. It's nice when the owner comes in here and we're not going through the third person stuff. It's nice to see,
Thank
someone's right in charge. I thought that was a very good presentation, because he does a good job. He does a very good job.
Yes.
And we sort of stick up for him, but you did a good job for that.
We
Thank
gotta
you.
stick up for her too, because she was pretty thorough with this too, I think. Okay.
All right, thank you. Any other comments, questions? Okay, seeing that this is a public hearing, thank you.
Motion of public hearing.
We have a motion by Steve, we have a second, Scott. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the public hearing is open. If anyone would like to come up and address the commission, please state your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening. My name's Craig Datema. I'm the CEO of Triangle Associates, and we have the office building under the name Triangle Properties immediately to the west of the proposed applicant, as well as a separate parcel owned by Triangle Equities. I own them all. So our biggest concern has to do with perhaps a lack of understanding and analysis of the shared detention easement area. We haven't even talked about that in this hearing, and that is the biggest issue that I would like the commission to consider. First, I want to talk a little bit about whether or not this applicant has met the requirements for the special exception use. Mr. VanManen noted that this is pretty close to the intersection. I sit right there in my office every day, and I see when those light changes, there's a heavy flow of traffic, whether they're turning left off from Fruit Ridge or they're going straight through on 3 Mile. And having large trucks, I see them coming and going from their existing facility. It creates a traffic problem. So we think that this does not enhance the general public safety, because this is a larger facility, more trucks queuing up, more people trying to get out. Item 3 of the special use exception talks a little bit about whether or not it will impair the property values of the neighbors. We own a Class A office building on the corner of 3 Mile and Fruit Ridge. I've been told by a lot of people that, hey, that looks really great for the city of Walker. It's well maintained, it looks good. I know we're in an industrial district and we have neighbors that do other things, but it certainly would not enhance, and it will actually reduce our property values. I think item 4 is probably the biggest issue. If we overlay where the detention area is that mouse still here?
Sorry?
Is the mouse still here? Or maybe, Ms. Anderson, you can highlight it. Maybe you can just highlight the area where they're proposing the detention area, because I notice it's not even on your maps. That's the elephant in the room today. But Mr. VanManen is proposing there's a shared detention area, and he's proposing to use up 100% of the capacity of that area without regards to the future development of our vacant parcel. And when we propose a use for that, the engineering staff was going to say, where are you going to put your water? So it's a shared detention area, and I'll talk a little bit more in detail points about that. But we clearly think that that it limits or eliminates the potential development of our vacant land. In item 5 talks about utilities, adequate. I think that kind of ties back to the detention. You'll notice the proposed plan pushes pavement right up to our property. A spot of detention in their proposed plan on VanManen's properties. A couple of facts here that I think might be very helpful for you to know. If you look at the easements, the legal descriptions, we all know those are somewhat difficult to understand. So I asked our attorneys to look into it. They came back, and we shared this just recently with Ms. Anderson and Mr. Connor. So as she said, a number of this information is coming in very late as we're trying to bring clarity to these issues. But it appears that the easement for the detention only covers 162 feet of the proposed 216-foot development. That means 25% of VanManen's land has no right to have any of his stormwater go to that shared detention area. And as I said, there is nothing on their property plan currently that's they're taking care of their storm detention. If you look at that on an equitable basis, this easement was written 35 years, 35 years ago maybe, and all 3 parcels were supposed to benefit from it. A portion of VanManen's property, Triangle Properties property, where our office building, and Triangle Equity's vacant parcel to the north. And if we did a proportional analysis, so much area, how much should each person use of that shared detention area, they should only have 1/4 to 1/3 of that area for their use. And we don't deny their use. We're talking about what we're objecting to is their exclusive use of our land. And I don't think that was ever thought of when that detention easement was written. The idea is that you have multiple parcels using the same area. You can make the pond a little bit bigger, a little bit wider. You don't have multiple ponds in a small area. And we're totally in favor of that. I also talked to Adam Feenstra, who did the storm drainage calculations. And he said that currently the pond does not cover the requirements for Triangle Associates office building based on the current standards. Of course, it was built 35 plus years ago, and the standards were less. But approving the site plan as proposed, we automatically have a non-conforming use of an existing developed property. And that means if we do any expansion to our building, we would have to have quite a bit of reworking to do to bring the detention capacity up to normal. So it's completely blocking me on development of my north parcel, which is a legal vacant piece of land, and as well as it's also creating problems and restrictions for any improvements to the Triangle Associates buildings. So that's the biggest issue that we have, and it's complicated. I served on a planning commission in Grand Rapids Township for 13 years. And of course, when I would hear things like this, I'd say, well, engineering needs to look at this. I've sized 1 detention basin. I'm a licensed architect. I sized a detention basin once in my career. And believe me, that was the last time I was going to do it. That's why we need the engineers. But this really needs to be studied appropriately. And, you know, the comments about, well, that's between the parties. Mr. VanManen and I met. I thought we came to agreement on a number of these points. I put it in writing to him. I sent a copy of that to Ms. Anderson so she would have it. And then Mr. VanManen reneged on everything that we talked about. So this is, you know, the site plan approval process is the only way I, as an adjacent property owner, can preserve my rights to develop our land similar to how their rights are to develop theirs. They can handle this through proper design. All they have to do is pull the paving back and enlarge the detention pond using the joint detention easement area as well as some of their own land. But they're trying to push all the water onto my property, taking away 100% of my capacity. That's just wrong. We do have concerns with the width of that entrance. Mr. VanManen says you can't, cars will go across the grass. Well, we can say that's an entrance only. We know they're all going to take it as an exit, right? And the wider it is, the more attractive it's going to be. And my concern is the safety of my employees and visitors in and out of our offices. So I thought if we just made it a little narrower and put some appropriate signage, that would help that situation. Trucks, double axle, single axle, part of that shared driveway has a maintenance agreement as well. I've owned the building for 20 years. We've not had any issues. We start rolling a bunch of heavy trucks over there, we know it's going to break down. And the shared easement says I have to pay for my pro rata share of that. So I am concerned about what kind of vehicles that can go on there. And Mr. VanManen's been very nice about trying to address these concerns in his initial planning. I appreciate that. But I think we can tighten down some of those constraints a little bit more through appropriate planning and appropriate design. So first, I would ask that you deny the special exception use. I think there's at least 4, maybe 5 of the criteria that a strong argument can be made that they do not meet. And especially, it's too early for site plan approval until this detention area can be worked out. And therefore, I would ask you, if you approve the special exemption use, that you would table the site plan approval until we get all this information worked out in an orderly manner and work with your staff in doing so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else that would like to make a public comment? Seeing as there is none,
Make a motion to close the public hearing.
motion to close the public
Support.
hearing and support by Steve. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, passes. Okay, so just one comment in regards to this. Initially, I think Tricia had mentioned it up front. It's not really for us or this board to get involved with private easements and in terms of settling out how they use them. So we should continue to kind of keep that in mind. Any comments, questions, or discussion on this?
I suppose we can talk about it. Yeah, looking through the engineering report had probably the most questions from the review that we got initially in the packet. The circulation, the turning templates, that's something that is pretty easy to have turned into Scott, would be my thoughts, and that's just kind of like a question answered. And with respect to the water connection, whether that's storm water or storm sewer or sanitary, that seems like, from my perspective, a yes or no, one way or the other from Grand Rapids. And then as long as they're willing to do those things, from my perspective, that's not giving you too much in terms of discretionary decision making. It just is either they have to connect to one or the other. Is that fair to say, Scott?
Yeah, I think we need some more details on the canopy. I still haven't seen a plan that showed what the canopy looks like or how that fits, and whether Grand Rapids could look at that and maybe find a way to allow it. Because I do agree. I mean, it's great that they're trying to take care of any oil, gas that gets onto the ground, but
Right.
they, if the grading isn't right, then those become collectors for stormwater,
Right.
and that's what floods the sanitary sewer system.
Right.
Which is obviously a bad thing.
Yeah. No. So I'm just trying to work through the items and questions that are available. So I mean, I can see my way to the approval, and it's just a matter of making sure that we're all comfortable with it from the other perspectives. Right.
Thanks, Steve. Any other comments? Okay, seeing as there is none, I will entertain a motion.
Okay, well, I guess we'll give it a try. I'll go ahead and make a motion for case 22-018 to approve the site plan and a special exception use permit for the self-serve fueling station for Pacific Pride on a 1.8 acre parcel split from 3677 3 Mile Road Northwest per the site plan last revision dated 7/5/22. Subject to the following conditions, the applicant shall address all items outlined in the city engineer's report dated 7/12/2022. Any changes to the approved landscape plan shall be reviewed and approved by staff prior to building occupancy. The applicant shall provide 3 sealed sets of civil engineered plans incorporating the recommended conditions to the Community Development Department prior to the issuance of a building permit. The applicant may be required to provide a financial guarantee in the form of a letter of cash or credit or cash escrow deposit to ensure the quality completion of site-related items such as landscaping at the time of building permit issuance.
All right, we have a motion by Steve. Do we have any support?
I'll support.
So we have support from Mark. All those in favor of this motion indicate by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Nay. So we have one that's opposed. All right, the motion passes. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is case number 22-021. This will also be a public hearing. This is for rezoning requests from AA, C1 and C4 to CPUD and RPUD, preliminary area site plan, PASP review, 4684, 4664, 4620, 4568, Lake Michigan Drive Northwest. Tricia, can you start us off, please?
Thanks, Jason. Since you gave most of the background information, I'll just state that the action requested by the Planning Commission tonight for this item is to review the rezone request from AA, C1 and C4 to CPUD and RPUD2, and to forward a recommendation to the City Commission for the approval, denial, or tabling of the request. And then the second action requested of the Planning Commission is to review the the preliminary area site plan, PASP, for a 217 unit multifamily housing development, 6 acre future residential development area, and 12 commercial outlots, and to grant approval with or without conditions, denial, or tabling of the request. Jason already listed the property addresses. The lot size is a total of 59.51 acres. As we stated, current zoning is agricultural, C1, local commercial, and C4, outdoor commercial. The future land use designation is mixed use, and the community character the future land use designation for the frontage of Lake Michigan Drive is mixed use, and for the remainder of the subject parcels, the future land use designation is residential growth, 4 to 8 units per acre. So, general location is on the south side of Lake Michigan Drive at Ferndale and the Lake Michigan Drive intersection. And we have Denny Cherette with Cherette Group with us tonight, and Todd Grassman. And we also have Brandon Simon, their engineer from Progressive AE. So, this is a bird's eye view of this area. We all know that this is an area that's been just kind of exploding with development lately, and so we're pleased to see that the subject parcels have a proposal for generally what has been indicated in the master plan. So you can see the Westtown Apartments over there, the Cherette Group. as you might remember, developed that site. And we have the commercial West Town over here, which is almost fully built out with the exception of this site right here. We've already had a proposal for a car wash there. This is the Blaine site, and then this is where we've got the Sandale Crossings Drive, Meyer, Fifth Third Bank, and then over here is the Goodwill store. So these are a lot of the pieces that we're gonna be kind of talking about as we go through this proposal and as I go through my presentation. So just a little bit of history. There's been a number of different incremental steps in terms of private development and public improvements, and the city kind of keeping an eye out for future access and making it easy for future development. So one of those things as it relates to this property is the acceptance of the Sandale Crossings Drive as public after the construction of Plains. The city saw the need or saw the benefit for that to be public, and it was accepted after it was built. So I don't think it was built 100% to public standards, but it still provides a pretty good access. And it provides access to the site. The development of the Goodwill store at 4696 Lake Michigan Drive resulted in a cross-access easement that was granted to the Goodale parcels from that site for ingress egress. And then the development of the Meyer parcel back in 2004 resulted in the signalization of that intersection at Ferndale and Lake Michigan Drive, and a cross-access easement was put in place at that time for the subject parcels for ingress egress and to access those parcels. So there's a lot of stuff that's happened over the past 20 years or so that have really kind of paved the way for you know, making it a little bit easier to be able to develop the subject sites. So as I noted, there's two requests in front of you tonight. The first is the rezone request. The second is the PASP. So they're asking for a rezone request for to split the property into two zoning designations, CPUD and RPUD2. So this this requires a planning commission recommendation and city commission approval. And I'll get into the process a little bit further in just a second, just to refresh everyone's memory on how this all falls together. And then the PASP, as you know, is a pretty broad review of the entire project. And then we have some specific requirements that are unique to the CPUD and the RPUD2 zoning districts. So when we look at the review process steps, typically an applicant will start with the rezone request. And then with that, you'll have the planning commission and the recommendation to the city commission. If the planning commission forwards a favorable recommendation, well, either way, if they do or not, the applicant still has a choice to go to the city commission. They hold a first reading of the rezone request. Then at a subsequent meeting, they'll hold a second reading of the request. And then if the zoning is approved, then 7 days after the clerk publishes the rezone in the paper, then the new zoning takes effect. Then an applicant could come back to the planning commission for a PASP. In this case, and I think in recent times, we've seen a lot of people ask for rezoning and PASP concurrently, and it seemed to work out pretty well, and it also allows the applicant a little bit more time to be able to keep their process moving. So the PASP request is reviewed by the planning commission and does not go to the city commission. The next step after that, if the PASP is approved, is for the FASP, and I would assume that this group would probably go for FASP of the multifamily piece first. That goes to the planning commission only. So that comes at a separate meeting. And then each individual commercial outlot will apply for FASP approval and will come to the Planning Commission, just like we did in Westtown. So this is my favorite slide to go through this, the review process for rezone and PASP with FASP. So again, just showing you what zoning districts are being applied for. The applicant has been able to give us a zoning exhibit which shows the separation of the two zoning districts. And you'll note that the line between the two goes right down the center of the roads, with the exception of this commercial outlet here. So the commercial keeps going. This is all commercial. Commercial and residential are shared on this end of the road. So you've seen this slide before. We have specific criteria that we use historically for reviewing rezone requests. And in order to approve the rezone request, we'd like to see all those criteria being met. And so the main, one of the main things that we're looking at when it comes to a rezone request is the proposal of the land use consistent with the master plan. There's obviously lots of components of the master plan that I've included in my report. Different sections of the master plan as it relates to corridor design, streets and transportation, appropriate land uses, buildings and site design. And then in some cases, we have areas within the city that call for a specific development plan. And we're looking for whether or not the proposed land use and zoning districts are consistent with that. We know that the master plan is a guide. It's not an ordinance, it's not a law, but it's a guide, and it's a thing that we have in place so that when there are requests for rezoning land, the people that make the decisions have something to go on to figure out what decision they should make and make sure that it's appropriate and consistent. So another thing that we're looking at is this land use compatible? So we've got two different land uses proposed here. Are these land uses compatible with the surrounding land uses? And in this case, you know, there's not a lot of surrounding residential, and that's one of the things that is usually a thing that we want to be very careful with, and we want to make sure that any commercial uses that are being proposed up against some existing residential, that there's appropriate screening, appropriate buffers, appropriate access, and all that good stuff. And so that brings us to the range of uses. So when you're proposing a rezone, you're asking for a new zoning district that has a range of uses. It's not just one or two land uses, it's a range. And so the beauty of a planned unit development is that in commercial anyway, the Planning Commission has a little bit of control in terms of being able to restrict certain land uses that aren't or might not be compatible. We're obviously also looking at health, safety, and welfare. Is the rezoning of this property going to negatively impact health, safety, and welfare of the people and the businesses and landowners in the city and the surrounding vicinity? Is it spot zoning? Is the request asking to rezone a parcel or a group of parcels that's either not in line with our master plan or not consistent with what's surrounding it? In this case, obviously, is not spot zoning. And then a big one is, can the land support the existing permitted uses? So are there utilities that are available, or could they be available? Is stormwater management feasible? Are there environmental limitations that would really kind of not be conducive to the land uses that are proposed within the requested zoning district? So these are all the things that we're looking at plus some. And I've detailed each of these in my report. And your job is to make a decision as to whether or not the proposed rezoning complies with those criteria. Uh-oh, what did I do? Now there's subtitles. This is really gonna throw me off. I don't know how that happened.
Well, this is complex.
It is complex. Do you guys need subtitles? Starting over. Oh, of course. Okay. Sorry, guys. Okay, so I've done quite a bit of reporting on consistency with the master plan. I've provided a table that indicates what's being expected of the subject site in terms of future land uses, future road connections, future preservation of sensitive areas, that kind of stuff. And so the master plan is a very big document, and this thing just got, the 2020 master plan just got wrapped up about 2 years ago. And there were some things that didn't transfer over from the previous the previous sub-area plans and one of the master plan updates. And so this particular area, I had to go back to the 2007 sub-area plan to find where we did in fact have road connections shown through this piece that was called West Standale at the time. And so this image pretty closely reflects what's being proposed. The signal is here. We're asking for public access here. There's a the proposed PASP shows a curb cut here across from LaSalle. And they're also showing an east-west road. And they connect their north-south road to what is now Standale Crossings. And so we feel that aside from solidified public connections, which I'll get into in a minute, the road network that's being proposed pretty closely resembles what the vision was for this West Standale area from the 2007 sub-area plan. Now, when we look at future land use and community character designations, streets and transportation, and the 2007 sub-area plan, and then the West Standale vision, we'll note that what's being proposed generally meets the vision for this area. When I say generally, when it comes to West Standale vision, I mean very generally. There was a time where, the city had worked on quite a detailed plan in terms of creating this walkable community with lots of low impact development, bioswales, and there's like a really pretty graphic in our master plan. But then we get to kind of what reality looks like, and whether we can try to pull that off. It sometimes depends on what private development is being proposed and what private developers are willing to work with the city on. And so what's being proposed with this particular development is a mix of uses. When we look at whether it's transit oriented, we can safely say that there's one of the BRT stops right there at Ferndale. And generally there's multifamily dwellings when it comes to close proximity to public transportation. So this is our western gateway to the city of Walker, and we want it to look nice. Preservation of wetlands, open spaces, I think what's being proposed here is accomplishing that. Variety of housing types. Right now, it's multifamily residential that's being proposed. They have a 6-acre piece that they are saving for some future residential. And then commercial adjacent to Ferndale and the BRT station. So that's what they're proposing there west of the bus stop. So in getting into the review of the PASP, when we look at a PASP, staff is looking at all of the criteria that are listed right in the code under section 94-213. And so these little bullet points here are all related to what the Planning Commission is looking at when they make their decision. We make sure that all of those boxes are checked from that ordinance when we do our review. Any box that's not checked, we include in our report and indicate whether it needs work or if it is something that is the Planning Commission will need to make a decision on. But again, this is a high-level review, and this is looking at streets, access, traffic, and circulation from a high level. We're not looking into those really deep level details yet. That comes at the FASP. But in a broad sense, we're looking at land uses. We're looking at density. Does the density fit with what the master plan calls for? Is the open space planned with active or passive recreational amenities? Is the PASP or the project adequately served by public utilities, or can it be? And we're also looking at pedestrian circulation and making sure that it's easy for pedestrians to move around the site and from the other land uses. So again, these are the areas that we are, in a broad sense, looking at. And then when we focused specifically on the CPUD, we're looking at 19.7 acres, and that includes the right-of-way, that includes the streets. It's 12 proposed outlots ranging in size from half an acre to 1.7 acres. They also are proposing one curb cut on the Lake Michigan Drive that would provide cross access across all the Lake Michigan Drive frontage lots. They have public access from Standale Crossings. They're proposing public streets throughout. Sidewalks on both sides of internal streets. They've provided us with a landscape concept plan with tree spacing every 100 feet. They have not specified any buffer widths. They've given us conceptual building envelopes and conceptual driveway locations onto the interior streets, and then also onto the Meyer cross-access roadway, which is private. They're showing monument signs for each commercial lot, and they're asking for additional monument signs on the internal streets as a PUD benefit. They are also proposing municipal water, sanitary sewer, and the uses of these commercial lots are consistent with current C2 zoning district plus some specific C4 uses. The applicant and I talked about how we don't really necessarily want to open up the door for all C4 uses, but they've made it clear that they would like to have a gas station. And so as we know, the gas station use is a permitted use in the C4 zoning district. But we don't necessarily want to open the door for other C4 uses which might not be compatible next to residential. So some of those regulated uses, you probably know what I'm talking about. So when we look at the RPUD2 district that's being proposed in the PASP, it's 217 units for the multifamily development. It's a mixture of 1 and 2 bedroom units in each building. And this is 34.1 acres. They also have a future residential area. The plan hasn't specified what type. It's 6 acres, not including right-of-way. I forwarded to you earlier today some comments from the applicant in terms of what type of uses they would potentially pursue there. And they've indicated that a maximum of 8 units per acre, which meets our master plan max there. But it's not noted on the plan. The overall density is 6.9 units per acre. On the 31.5 acres, and that doesn't include any units that would be in the future residential area. They're proposing 9.3 acres of open space and a lot of amenities, a lot like the Westtown apartments. So they're proposing a dog park, pickleball courts, swimming pool, clubhouse, dog wash station, lots of dog-centric things, which I think a lot of people like. I might be a little bit biased. 506 total parking spaces. Buffers haven't been specified. Sidewalk network is connecting to all the commercial areas. Access from the proposed public street network. And municipal water, sanitary sewer, and stormwater. And then they're also planning to preserve the unimpacted wetlands. So if I wanted to highlight some of the issues that we've talked about, you know, as staff and with the applicant, one of those is that the public access onto Lake Michigan Drive. There's been some discussions with property owners who would need to deed that a piece or a portion of their property to the city for public purposes. And it's my understanding that those discussions have been positive up until this point. But like I said, we don't have anything solidified yet. And so the Planning Commission is gonna need to decide whether or not that piece of the PASP is important enough to maybe take a pause in approving anything at tonight's meeting, or waiting until we get some actual concrete answers on those public access points. Because we've historically always looked for public road connections and redundancy and opportunities to create access to other parcels that haven't been developed yet, but usually someday will. And so they are proposing their internal streets as public. They are proposing a public connection, and they have a public connection to Wilson Avenue from Standale Crossings. They have future cross access easements through the CPUD lots. And then they have a private easement with Meyer on the east side of the site. So that's all a private drive that goes behind the Meyer building. But there's access for ingress egress to the subject site. And there's a curb cut onto Lake Michigan Drive that would access lots 2 and 3 of the CPUD. So going back to those 2 access points, this is the Goodwill side, and this is the Ferndale signal, and this is the Meyer private cross access drive. And this is Fifth Third Bank right here. And so these are the 2 spaces where we're saying public access is very important to us. Another thing I wanted to point out is we have a piece here that, when I reviewed the plan, I couldn't find any information related to the future residential area. We need to know what type of residential is proposed, what maximum density is proposed, and any proposed public street connections, what kind of streets, public, private, what would that look like? And so, you know, like I said earlier, we've gotten some correspondence with the applicant as of today and, you know, earlier this week. But as you know, when I review my plan and create these presentations, it's well before the day of the meeting, or even a couple days before the meeting. So let me go back. A lot of the items that I've listed in my report, under the section that I've called other items, I sent all these items to Brandon Simon, their engineer, a week ago Friday. And so we had a chance to, last week on a Monday, go through each of these items, just as a courtesy. I don't normally do that with all applicants, but since this is a really big project and there's you know, a lot of people involved, and we want to make sure that we give the applicant enough opportunity, I decided to go over each of those items. In my opinion, a lot of this stuff is manageable. You know, and they've provided a statement with whether or not they agreed to the recommendation that I've given in my report, in terms of, you know, like, for example, you should show that the smallest commercial lot size is 21,780 and not 30. So there's some typos and there's a few, you know, manageable items that just need to be fixed. But then there's some larger, you know, PASP related things that the Planning Commission is, will need to decide, and this is why I prepared two motions. You'll need to decide whether some of these things are complex enough for you to be able to, or for you to get a comfort level with being able to approve a plan tonight with the 13 conditions plus the 22 other items. Or if you feel like some of the items should be worked out and bring them back to the Planning Commission. So that's kind of what you're looking at tonight. And you know, when you hand off to staff the however many conditions of approval to work out with the applicant after the Planning Commission meeting, if there are some items that the applicant maybe doesn't necessarily agree with staff's recommendation, we end up back at the Planning Commission anyway. So if we can't come to an agreement, I think usually we can. These guys have been really good to work with. They obviously have a massive team full of lots of bright people. But that's kind of how that works out. So if there are items that the Planning Commission is feeling like, I don't know if I feel comfortable with staff handling all that, or if there's even just one item that you're not comfortable with, then that's why I made that motion to table. And so when it comes to the rezone, I am making the recommendation for you to forward a favorable recommendation to the City Commission for the rezone request. Based on the findings that I listed in my report as it relates to all of the rezoning criteria. The recommendation for the PASP, I personally think from a staff perspective, it's most appropriate to table your action tonight. But again, I made two motions depending on how you're feeling tonight, and after hearing the presentation from the applicant, whether you are finding yourself at a comfort level of being able to approve with that big list of conditions. So That was a very long presentation, and I'm done talking for a few minutes, and I'm here for questions.
All right, thank you, Tricia. Any questions for Tricia at this point? Seeing as there is none, Scott, would you provide us with your report, please?
Well, if Denny's whole team is gonna give presentations, I better hurry up, or we're gonna be here all night. So I'll move quick. Because this, well, first off, you usually get technical writing from me with bullet points and, you know, kind of binary code, yes, no stuff. When we're looking at a PASP, it's a little bit more creative writing, so you have to indulge me a little bit there. So you're looking more like, you know, paragraphs kind of generally describing things. For the overall layout and feasibility, our vision has been to try to get a public road network through here, and that's been that vision for a long time. I think we missed the boat a little bit when the original Meyer came in because we didn't grab anything there, but when Blaine's came in, I'll give Frank credit, he really put his foot down and said, we have got to get that road turned into public, even though it didn't meet any of our public standards. And we almost had to resuscitate our DPW director when we said he had to take that over. But we did, and that was to set the framework for what's happening here so that there could be a public road network here, and we'd have redundancy, public redundancy, emergency access, all the good reasons that we have for making sure that there's multiple ways in and out. So the current layout seems to take care of that connectivity. That's pretty good. So as I mentioned, we took over Standale Crossings, so that's a connection point to the east. The two other public connections, as Tricia pointed out, one is to the west is the Goodwill site. The one to the east is Ferndale. So we're working with Goodwill, I think it's Goodwill Enterprises and Meyer. I feel really good about the Goodwill access. There's great synergies for them to allow connections here for all of these businesses. They can pull in traffic from other places where now they've got a single serve driveway out front. So talking to their team, I feel really good about that. You know, Meyer is also a great partner to the city, and I feel like they're going to want to work with us too. But there's going to be some issues there because they're most likely going to have some conditions that they would like to impose. They're probably going to not want a lot of competition. We were very surprised when they were working with Blaine's because they do compete on some different things. So I think it's important to get those details worked out, certainly ahead of time with Meyer. In terms of what would be laid out, if you look to the Goodwill access, the plans show a 36-foot curb and gutter section through there, which is what we would want as our standard that allows for left turning out of that site. That's going to be difficult at times, but it's an existing driveway, and MDOT has reluctantly agreed that, yeah, that's a decent connection point. We can live with it. The spacing's okay. So I think that fits well with what they've proposed. That was a key recommendation from the traffic impact study review that we did that will be attached at the end of my report. Then at Ferndale, there's also, we believe, the need to add a right turn lane. So what you've got currently at the Ferndale light in the southern leg is you've got room for a left turn out and then a straight across and a right out that's shared. So as soon as one person wants to go straight across into the neighborhood, maybe they've come over here for fast food, dentist appointment, whatever, car wash, there's all the talk about car washes. If they want to go straight across, then that's really going to booger things up for a while because Lake Michigan Drive has very long signal times. It makes all the sense in the world at the beginning of a project like this to make sure that these driveways are configured correctly. So that's going to take a little bit of work, but we think it's feasible. We just need to have Meyer work that out. There's one issue there that if the curb has to move further east, the way that Meyer split up that property was very unorthodox. They put the property line right on top of the back of curb, which we don't typically see. So technically, when snow's being plowed off that onto the bank property, it's a trespass. So there may be an issue there to work through, but I think those are kind of the details that are yet to come. If these public connection points can't be achieved, I think we need to take a step back then and look and say, can this all be done with a private road network? And the easements that are in place probably would support that, but then it's a decision that's really a planning decision. Are we okay with private ring roads, private access, no rules about driveways and all those kinds of things? And that's certainly something that you'd want to talk some more about. There's also a driveway across from LaSalle, and we talk a lot about access management, so you might look at that and say, are we going to allow that? And we talked extensively with MDOT, and although it's Although we try not to have too many driveways, this one is spaced appropriately, and they were comfortable allowing it as a full-service driveway. The one caveat is that we want to make sure that there's good cross-access between lots 1 and 5 there. And if you see in the traffic study, I listed those as different lot numbers. As this has grown and matured, the lot numbers have changed, but it's generally those 5 lots along the front. And the cross-access, I don't think we have to lay out the alignment for that yet, because it might change depending on who comes into those sites. It might be on the back, it might be on the front. The idea is that it's continuous east-west across all those sites, so that that one driveway can work for everybody, and that so both of those public accesses can work for everybody. The final area site plan. MDOT has also said that the Goodwill Drive and the LaSalle Drive, which is referred to as the site drive, they'll each have to have a right turn lane and a taper. And MDOT's got charts and graphs that deal with all that stuff. Certainly their engineers are familiar with that, and those would have to be put in place. That's going to require just a little bit of right-of-way, probably on lots 1 and 2, to make sure that the sidewalk can fit in there. You can see that there's kind of a narrower right-of-way on Lake Michigan Drive there on lots 1 and 2, and then it gets a little wider on lot 3, so that'll have to be cleaned up. And in the traffic impact study, I don't know if we shared that in the report or not. I think we talked about sharing the executive summary of that, but it talks about that there's really not any improvements needed or warranted based on this development, and part of that is because they're using signal optimization. And again, extensive talks with our consulting engineer and with MDOT about that. What that means is they want to change the signal timing on other signals to adjust it so that there's no impact here. But that doesn't mean there's no impact on other locations. And I think MDOT was very concerned about that, and they said if it's going to steal any green time from Lake Michigan Drive or Wilson, they're probably not going to buy that. So again, we may want to look at that without the optimization so that we're being honest with you about the traffic. And in terms of the honesty, I think that we put one example in our report, and that was the table for M45 and M11 to show you all the detail that goes into looking at each one of these intersections. And so you can see there, they look at all of the legs, they look at all the movements, they look at it today, they look at it with background growth, they look at it with their mitigation, and then they look at it at total build out. And you can see if there's degradation or not using the A, B, C, D, E, and F letter grades that you get for those. So the TIS, the traffic impact study, also shows that dual lefts are warranted at M45 in the eastbound direction to onto M11. And that's something we've been talking about already. It's been at our traffic committee. We've had numerous discussions about it. The study shows that it's warranted without this development, so we know it's needed now. One of the problems with that, though, is that the roadway itself doesn't have enough width to allow that extra lane to be utilized. It could be put in there, but it only has stacking for 2 or 3 cars, and they're concerned about that. What we've asked MDOT to consider is a total restriping of the road, to steal a foot here and there, and to try to make sure that we can get that in there, because again, if we move forward and we end up with cars that have to wait 4 or 5 cycles to turn left there, they're going to cut through neighborhoods, they're going to speed, they're going to, wreak some havoc. So now is the time to consider that, and we'll be looking at that in the background with MDOT. So back to feasibility, Tricia mentioned public sewer and public water. It does appear that water, sewer, storm sewer, none of that's really going to be a problem out here. There are 2 lots that are a little bit low. That's lots 1 and 2. They'll have to have a grinder pump to pump their wastewater up and then have it enter the system by gravity, but that's not completely unreasonable. It happens a lot at the end of a sewer run. So I think from a feasibility standpoint, that's all stuff that we can work out as we move forward. If you look at lots 7 through 9, those are the east-west lots that are east of the apartments on the back of Meyer. There are some driveways shown there on the east side, and I think that's probably okay to show those at this stage with the PASP, but they may be a little bit troublesome in terms of what their FASP looks like if you have too many vehicles going up against the back of Meyer, because Meyer is built right up to the easement, and they although they've blocked that off, there is an easement in place there. But I guess we have to look at, is it best and is it safe to put people back on that easement and use it like a kind of a hot alley to get in and out of there? And it may not be our best decision if there's doorways that open up to it, for example, and there's people screaming through. So we'll have to look at that in the future and look at the pros and cons and weigh that out. So if you do decide to move forward, or when we do decide to move forward, there's a few recommendations that we would have to keep these guys moving. As we're seeing with many of these apartment complex developments that we're going through right now, there's a critical path. Everybody wants to start putting up buildings right away. And in this case, they need to work on the utility plans. So I would recommend that when they do get their PASP, they begin working on those detailed utility plans right away. We have to take a role in that. We would help facilitate that with Grand Rapids. There's a couple of different stages to work through, and we want to get that ready to go so that they could start working on the public improvements as soon as possible. And then we would have to work with them to preserve what's going to be a public road, what are going to be public utilities, and save them, and potentially have like one crossing point like we did with South Industrial Drive. And what was the name of that company? Speed Rack. So they were building the road, they were building their building in the background, but they worked off to the side of that road while it was being built to make sure that it was in pristine shape and under drains weren't run over and gravel contaminated and things like that. So we will need to work that out, and that will definitely be a part of a development agreement or a memorandum of understanding that would have to be put together by the manager's office. So a lot of stuff to consider there. I think if you move forward, we can certainly answer questions to help you do that. If you're not ready, we can help with those answers as well.
All right, thanks, Scott. Any questions or comments for Scott at this stage?
Yeah. We've talked about the intersection of Lake Michigan Drive and Wilson. We haven't talked about the north and south side. You know, we all see Wilson backing up from Johnson Park all the way up to Meyer. Is this development gonna help speed that up, making Wilson a little bit easier to travel, both north and south? Or is this still just gonna add more traffic to that?
Yeah, I think that's impossible to add more density, to add more traffic, to add more business, and then to say it's gonna get better on the east-west direction. So my answer would be no.
I'm just saying, I mean, I've seen, you know, where Wilson's gonna be widened eventually, maybe. You know, you see the fire hydrants off to the side, so they're gonna, you know, start doing that. Just when? I mean, I travel time, and depending on what time you're going through there, as we all know. But I'm just saying, this is going to really add traffic, as we know, because you can only get out of this in so many locations. You can't come to the back because of, you know, the wetlands and things like that. So just this corner is starting to, it scares me.
There's no plan for Wilson with MDOT. We talk to them all the time. I've been here 25 years, and I've talked to them for 25 years about it. And there is no plan. I can tell you that in this current budget, we had some legislators working in the background to help put money in to do exactly that, and it was big money, and it didn't get included. So if we can put the biggest budget in history together and then agree that the next few budgets are going to be smaller, it's pretty unlikely that in the near future we're going to see a $100 million project, probably more than that,
Right.
to put that together.
I mean, I just look at the, you know, the East Belt line. It used to be a 2-lane road, and now it's got islands and everything, and that's what Wilson should be moving towards.
Couldn't agree more.
So, okay.
Thanks, Pat. Any other questions or comments for Scott? Okay, seeing that there is none, would the applicant like to come up and present? Please state your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening, Todd Grassman, J Development, and Denny Cherette with the Cherette Group. We're in Granville, and Denny's in Grand Haven. Couple things I want to put in a little perspective. We worked very similarly with Westtown. Similar project, almost a mirror. We understand we've got some concern. I hear a lot about the public access. I think the public access piece is unique. We have no issue working and giving the city the public access they're asking for on the land we own. I think it's unique that the applicant in front of us, where you got into private easements on private land, the city doesn't want to get involved with it. We have access, and we have the land we need to have the proper access to meet the MDOT requirements. We also have the connection, the public access to Standell crossings. So I think that can be worked out, and we've really been working with Scott and Teresa in the city and MDOT and the team. We think that's pretty good. We think we can make forward with that. I think this is, Patrick, you mentioned that you're worried about the intersection. I think that's one reason the city and staff is so concerned about the public going through there. If you look at what we've talked about before, this is sort of step one in getting access around the corner. We can come out, you see that little stub that goes to the cul-de-sac to the bottom? We own all the land down to O'Brien. We've sat before and talked about there's probably going to be that cul-de-sac goes across. We got to get consumers power easement. Then it goes through and comes out to Wilson at another point. And then in probably a phase 3 or 4, however we work it, it comes down and gets a connection to O'Brien on a connecting point that we own there. So I think the general idea is to get traffic around that corner, so it isn't stuck right there. I think what we're going to ask is we're going to ask that you continue to let us move forward from a PSP standpoint to work with, like we did last time, on all the pieces and the parts. We do have to keep moving. We got a whole team here. We're investing a lot of money into do this right. When MDOT came back and Scott came back and talked about, hey, we need to get these not just a tapering lane, a decel lane in there. We've said, yeah, that'll work. We can go ahead with that. The Meyer access is probably going to be the most challenging. The unique part there is Fifth Third. We're not going to move Fifth Third. Any challenge there is going to go west onto our property. So if another lane's needed and MDOT needs it, well, then we're going to go into our land, which we own. So the challenge there will be just whether or not Meyer gives you, the public, the deed to that, 24 feet, Scott, or 30 feet of their land that they own. We're going to give you what we have, and it's going to be public. The Goodwill people, I think they've been working really good with us. We expect that won't be a challenge. We can improve the road. We've got the access there. We've got the right to go there to access their property and to make the road wide enough so that we meet the standards that MDOT and the city's requiring. We just want to move forward, continuing to plan and build a great project like we did at Westtown. The difference here is you don't have neighbors to the back. They're going to complain. We got the cemetery to the west. You got Meyer to the east. You got Blaine's to the east. And we own the rest. And we're not going to be complaining about it. So please just give us that opportunity to work forward. Denny's going to go through a whole bunch of the items, some of the specifics in the report. I think this morning we came back and said, I think Trish, your last 22 items there, I think we basically said we'd agree to those. Scott, I think we've pretty much agreed to the items you've had unless something else pops up. But generally speaking, we've been pretty good at working with staff and us and making sure the project turns out to be a great project like it did at Westtown. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, commissioners and Scott and Tricia, for giving us the opportunity to present. As Todd just indicated, we were the developers, partners on the Westtown at Wilson project. We're hopeful you found that to be a good project. We think. Yes, I'm sorry. I wanted to thank you for hearing us tonight, as well as staff. Todd's company and our company jointly owned and developed the Westtown at Wilson project, which we trust you found to be an okay project. What I want to do is not regurgitate a lot of what's already been said. I want to make a few points and respectfully encourage you to approve, if you're inclined, the PASP tonight, and I need a little contextual history so that it'll maybe make that easier for you to consider. Tricia mentioned this is a huge project. This project, when we did Westtown, was 199 units, 10 units an acre for the apartments. This is 217 units, about 5% more, and we're at 6.9 units an acre, below your 4 to 8 unit an acre master plan. And I met with Frank Wash a year and a half ago on this, And the genesis of that, we were told, was a neighborhood discussion to try to have less density, where ironically you typically see more density than our most typical apartment projects run between 12 and 16 units an acre. Because the family has owned the land for decades, we have the advantage of capital and a lower basis in the land. We're approved or not approved, your master plan would allow us to go to 252 units. We've narrowed that to 217 units. We think that's better planning. So we're less than 7 units an acre for a multifamily project, a Class A fully amenitized project. That's the lowest I've seen in 45 years of doing this. Todd mentioned that the transitional neighbors, it's an orderly transition. To the east is the back of the Meyer. To the west is the Rosedale Cemetery, and as Todd's explained, to the south, and then M45 to the north. So when we did Westtown, the night we appeared here with less detail than we've provided you now, we were gratified to receive a PASP recommendation as well as a zoning recommendation. And there's, as Tricia mentioned, a motion to table or a motion to approve. We are going to kindly request you to approve because, as Scott pointed out, there's not only engineering to do, there's a great deal of architectural and engineering, too many things to talk about tonight, and we really would like to go down parallel paths. Unlike many multifamily developers, we try to be thoughtful, we try to be interactive and in partnership with the communities we're in. And indeed, we had I think, a very, very good experience with staff and the Planning Commission and the City Council with Westtown. And so a few things that I'd like to point out. We've had multiple meetings starting back in March with city staff. You have, or I have, I think you have a email from Frank Wash where he indicated that based on what I've seen to date, the PASP is approvable with certain conditions. Those conditions have evolved over the last several weeks, and Trish has been very responsive, as has Scott. And as recently as this morning, the one issue that had not been, that Frank had said he wasn't as concerned that we identified the density of the 6 acres. But Tricia had asked, and we committed today to limit that, as she pointed out. I will point out that in the packet that you received from us, on page 4, we did identify the uses and committed to those for that other 6 acres. And those include only single-family, multifamily, senior housing, or condominium with now a limit, which Tricia had asked for, of a maximum of 8 units per acre. Again, well below a market standard. The other, we generally concurred with everything that Scott said in his report. We've had ongoing discussions. In fact, the mayor kindly reached out to Meyer, and we had a meeting that the staff set up with the Goodwill folks. The difficulty is we don't own those properties, and we cannot dedicate those or quitclaim those to the city without agreement. We believe we meet the criteria as is outlined in your PUD, FSAP, PASAP, and underlying zoning for access to public roads. Indeed, at Westtown, the interior road system's a private road. And so respectfully, when Tricia mentioned that there were many points to work out, we stipulated to all 22 today. But in order to continue, we need a PASP. You have the full discretion of the FASP. Not for the apartments, just like last time. We can't pull a permit, we can't start construction, we can't do anything until that's ironed out. What I can tell you is that we have provided significantly more detail here at Vista 45 than we did at the approval that you provided simultaneous with the zoning recommendation for Westtown. We are much further along, and we're frankly fairly close to an FASP. So in order to continue down multiple paths, it's frankly very important to us and to the development to continue this. Indeed, Mr. Connor had mentioned that in his memo to you that with an PASP of this side, we need to set aside many of the technical details to focus on the overall layout. We have done that. We have spent, as Todd mentioned, a great deal of money, and we know that's not your your problem. That's our responsibility, and that doesn't weigh into your thinking. But what I do think it speaks to is the intentionality and the sincerity and the effort to come together again as members of the community. The Goodale family are members of the community. JAG is headquartered here. I took the long way here and got here in 20 minutes from my house. The entire development team is the same team we had last year. Progressive this time, other than Morin Brugink, but it's the same builder, same architect, same developer, same landowner. It's the same folks. We live here. We invest here. We're mindful. And I hope that you find that as what we completed at Westtown, this will be even nicer. There is a crying need, which I don't know whether or not that comes under your purview, but there's about a 30,000 unit shortage in Metro Grand Rapids for multifamily that will continue to broaden with the gap in affordability. And this is what's called attainable housing, not upper end. And our pricing, if people ask, will be similar to the market, frankly similar to our other project. When we read some of staff notes, they said you get one chance at this. Respectfully, you've got lots of chances. If you will consider approving the PASP tonight, we will cut our architect loose to complete plans and specs. We've already spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on civil and wetlands and traffic. The traffic study did indicate that the impact was minimal. Multifamily has the lowest impact of any use of developed improved property, of any. We talked about the number of parcels, and we, just as we did with Westtown, we said it could be between X and Y. We have theoretical lots drawn. They could broaden. There was discussion about the need for connectivity, a connectivity lane that Mr. Wash said he thought he could deal with later, but we again today committed to it. We committed to the width. The challenge, and we will continue to work, is this. We, as Todd said, we have 6, I think, curb cuts of our own right now. We're going to close 5 of those. And we like what we've worked out with the staff on this, but we don't control Meyer. Indeed, we don't control Goodwill. But whether or not the interior road system is public or private, we want to do whatever you want, and we're willing to spend the significant, it's about 3x between a public standard and private roads to build that. We've priced it. Brandon priced it for me yesterday. And we're willing to do that. What we can't know is if we'll get that cooperation. We respectfully believe that's not necessary or required, and indeed, we could still build those spine roads as, and I don't have the mouse, but as are depicted there. But in order to continue, we will be, we need to have an endorsement saying, okay, we'll approve the preliminary area site plan. You approve the final for the apartments, and just like last time, you approve every single commercial sale. Site plan approval, parking, everything. And so we believe we have met we've met every request that has come from planning, and including the slide that was up a little while ago, 94-213. We believe we've met all those. We respectfully do not, if you're inclined toward this project, which we think is a huge benefit to the community, aligns with the master plan. We've lowered the density, lower than anything we know of currently, that there is a reasonable and fair-minded approach to continue to work together, but to endorse the PASP tonight so that we can continue. We commit to you, we will build a very, very good project that I trust you'll be very pleased with and proud of. And we're well capitalized, we're local, and we're communicative. So with that, I don't want to repeat myself, but certainly want to answer any and all questions that you would have tonight, but our goal tonight would be to get the recommendation for both the rezoning and the PASP recommendation. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
Yes.
Go ahead, Pat.
You had mentioned that, I know housing is at a premium right now. What is the occupancy rate of Westtown right now? Do you have a number? I mean, are we at 100%?
I believe it's 100%. There is a waiting list everywhere. Every project we have is 100%. And it's not going to change, folks. Not in the foreseeable future.
Well, and the reason I bring it up because we have multiple projects in Walker right now. As you know, 2 golf courses are turning into, more housing. So
yes,
just want to make sure that
Yes, Mr. Lowry, we did a linear regression analysis, a gap analysis, and the absorption we think is about 4 or 5 to 1, meaning that for every unit you could build, there would be 5 potential occupants. When we build, and we've built many, many projects, if we can get to a 1.5 to 1, there's 2 ways to fill apartments: increasing jobs and population with a positive gap of 1.5 to 1, or a better mousetrap. You're better, you're competitive price, you're cooler, right? Everything's knocked out of the park here, and it's not going to change.
I think the other thing that you've got is the amenities are so close. You've got so many amenities right there that people like. We hear that from Westtown people that stay there. You got everything right there. You can go across the street to Meyer, you got Aldi, you got all this food there, and you've got the bus line.
Yeah.
So the people that typically end up in those units are the younger people that they don't mind taking buses where they want to go. They Uber back and forth to places, and they've got everything right there. So I think it sort of fits in with what we're trying to do, and then I think it's that next step towards better access to other parts of the city.
Yes. Yeah,
No, I
that's
totally
exactly
agree.
right.
And then also Walker's been putting a lot of new businesses in, so we need places for those people to live.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
it's a,
Yes,
It's
we are
positive.
building a project just anecdotally right now out on the lake shore, and Andrea could help me or Larry with this. We're building another 217 unit project. The buildings are getting roughed up right now. We have 254 people on the newsletter wanting information. I've done this for a long time. I've never, ever seen anything like it. And it speaks well to what you've all done here. We would not be developing if we didn't think there was good planning and other amenities. We're just kindly asking that we can move forward down these other paths. There's much to do, and you get another bite at the apple. So there's a tremendous need. And I don't know that that weighs into your decision-making, but there is, to answer your question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments for the applicant? Joe, you look like you want to say something, but.
I got this on Friday morning, 130 pages. I take this job very seriously, and I went out and walked the land. I went to the cemetery, and I went to the Goodwill, and I realized how swampy it was. But to pass everything you want to tonight, we're getting old, we're tired. No question you guys are successful. You don't have to tell us that 4 different times. And I think we've planned this well, but I'm not in favor of passing the whole thing tonight. I've got to answer to people. I don't know where people are. This is a big project. And to see you once and we pass it, I don't think that's doing our fair share. That's my impression.
I appreciate
Just a
that.
quick comment on that. If it were to pass, then it would come back to us one more time for a final area site plan on that.
So you got it. All your friends are going to say, gee, what happened? I didn't know that was going on, you know?
Well, I think it's fair to say that you wouldn't see a FASP request until we had staff support going down all the I's and T's.
Yeah. This is the preliminary to allow us to continue so we can get all those answers, sir.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the point? All right, thank you. This is also a public hearing. Can I entertain a motion to open a public hearing?
So moved. Second.
Okay, we have a motion to open the public hearing and support. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, is open. Anyone from the public that would like to have a comment, question, please come to the podium, state your name and address for the record.
It's just us.
I can keep talking, but nobody's standing.
Motion to close.
Support.
Okay, we have a motion to close the public hearing and support. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, the public hearing is closed. All right, so there's quite a few things that are going on with this. I think the first, we have 2 separate items that we need to kind of tackle. Let's talk specifically about item number 1 at this point, which would be the rezoning request. And I think we can kind of go down the line here. I'll start on the left-hand side and we'll work that way, and then on the other one we'll come from the right. Fair? Okay.
As far as the rezone, I see no issue with granting that request. I think they meet all of the criteria, and I would be comfortable issuing a favorable recommendation to City Commission on that issue.
Same.
I'm going to come at this one a little different. I'm probably an outlier on this, but for my part, if we're tabling the PASP, I'd probably rather table the rezone as well. I'd like to keep the 2 paired because and this is just me coming at it, my perspective, and there's been a lot of comparison to Westtown, and I do see a lot of Westtown in this project, but having just been through the master plan process and as involved in that as I was, I don't think that our intention was to have this parcel look the way that we intended to have the Westtown parcel look. And that, I mean, from my perspective, that's a concern. I think we had some different types of development that we expected to see come through in this. I think that's why you see the different designations and the type of community character that we expected to have, and the different density wasn't for the sake of creating more space in the same type of buildings. It was with the expectation that we'd have a different style of even residential development. So, I mean, for my part, I'd prefer to keep everything together so that we can tackle all of it at once, have some more conversation about what the actual structure of the layout looks like, because at the end of the day, the rezoning is potentially the most important part of the entire development, because once we've rezoned it, that's the law of the land. And once the rezoning's in place, that layout is the future of the lot. And whether we're negotiating about how dense and which buildings get developed by what plan, at the end of the day, that's how it will look from the land use. So, I mean, that's where I come from on this, and I may be an outlier on it, but that's just where I come in with some hesitation to say, this is one of those significant undeveloped lots that we've talked about for a long time on the planning side. I would rather keep this all one piece so that we can tackle it as a whole and look at the site comprehensively as we're going through the process.
If we had a different project, would the rezone be any different than what we're proposing here tonight?
I think that my point is I'd like to keep that conversation open to say, okay, is this how we want this layout? You know, we talked a lot about mixed use through the site. We talked a lot about having different layouts and different structures to it, and that's where I feel like once you put that zoning in place, it becomes inflexible for the rest of that conversation. And again, this is just me making my point and standing on my planning pedestal.
I should probably clarify, my intention on this was to discuss these separately and then vote at the end on.
I know, and it's my fault I'm putting them together, but it's all in my mind paired in that way.
Joe?
Well, Steve is on the planning commission, or the city commission also, so he gives us some, I would be in favor of, I would argue with that. I would be in favor of passing the rezoning tonight and waiting on the other. It bothers me, as big a project as this, there's nobody here complaining. Do they not know about it? Maybe, huh?
All right, thanks, Joe.
So I would vote for the rezoning.
So in regards to the rezoning, I agree with Steve that they should be looked at together. I just want to continue to kind of keep so we get a pulse of the board in terms of where we're at on that, separated. I think at the end here, then we can look at a vote. I too am in favor of the rezoning request. I think that's good. Let's go to item number 2. And maybe, Joe, you could start us off with that. I think we heard some of your initial comments on that. And if you want to just hold that, that's fine too.
Well, I agree. We've got a good track record. These guys are on board. Our staff they're doing a good job, but I think we're just moving so darn fast for a big project. And I mean, I'll go home and say, would you get past everything tonight? Well, I didn't even know what was going on, you know? So I think we ought to go a little slower on that.
Mark?
Well, I see the proposal. I see that they agreed to all the conditions. Seems to be happening rather quickly. I mean, with the memo today, I'd rather see it more on paper and with staff reviewing it and making sure. At the end of the day, I guess I would be hesitant to step on staff's toes and want to go forward with this tonight.
Steve?
Yeah, removing my larger, maybe at times excessive expectations of what type of development I would want. There is just a long list of items, and historically for this board, we've taken it when we have a list of items like that to send it back to staff so that we can come with a clean product that we can then move forward and not have those questions lying out there, and not, I guess, delegating such a long list of pieces for them to address without, I guess, our oversight. So that's where I'm at on that.
Pat?
Yes, I'm in favor of tabling it, but not too long. I mean, I know you want to get moving. I hate to stall progress. And I know the West Town went went very well, and we made a decision right away. We made some decisions maybe too rash, too fast. So I would be in favor of tabling the FASP, but again, I don't want to delay this project too long. We need to all work together on this, because as we know, I mean, time is money. So that's kind of where I stand right now.
Yeah, I'm also in favor of tabling at this point for reasons everybody else has stated. I'd like to see more detail on paper, specifically to the single-family component. That seemed to be pretty empty, so I'd like to see what they have in mind for that part as well. As far as other additional details, just like to see it actually presented prior to us being at the meeting, and as has already been stated, it's great that they're agreeing to the conditions, but we'd like to see it put forth on an actual application.
Thank you. So it appears that the board is more in favor of a table than a approval recommendation at this stage in the game. It's clearly not a deny. I think in terms of, for me, I can get behind, although I don't get to make a motion here this evening, I can get behind moving forward with this. There's a lot of things that they've quickly agreed to and moving forward with that. There's also a lot of things that we need to talk about to make sure that we're comfortable with. And some of those just aren't showing up. For instance, Tricia had mentioned some of the buffer widths, some of the things that are happening, like you had said, in the single family. There's definitely a few things that we'd like to see some more information on. The road and the access points, it sounds like there's still a little bit of work that may need to be done, but I think that can be done in the background before a final area site plan. So that's one of the reasons why I could somewhat get behind it. I think that it's important, though, that we also talk about the master plan. This particular site's been looked at for quite some time. I think it's on page 67 of the master plan, where they have kind of in bold, and I quote, "It should not be developed as conventional multifamily housing complex with commercial outlets along Lake Michigan Drive," which is exactly what's in front of us tonight. So we need to be very careful about how we're looking at changing away from the master plan, and if that's an acceptable situation for us. Obviously, things changed since the master plan was done, and we can't always meet and mix it, and this is a project that they proposed in front of us. That this is the way they're coming in with it. So if in fact we were to table or pass this, I think we need to give them direction as to what we would want to do or see that might be exactly like it is, or potentially change to closer meet with the master plan. That would only be fair to give them some direction on that.
And Mr. Chair, I agree, and that's a big part of what I was kind of trying to get at, and with the way that I look at the project, and again, you and I are both in that process. I guess I don't want to hold this up more than it needs to be, right? We want to be able to allow folks to get the project moving forward. I know that they've got a lot tied up into it, but there's a part of me that says, okay, whenever we've had one of these major undeveloped lots come through, we've gone through the process, we've done the work session, we've sat down with city leaders and said, okay, let's have a serious discussion about what the vision is on these projects so that we can match this very important development for the city to what the future expectation of the role it's going to play in the greater development of Walker. That's, again, this is just me saying that the part of me really does want to have the full work session, but I can comfortably say that this is not the style of development that I expected to see here. And I think that there's some reshaping that would have to go for me to feel comfortable, but again, I'm just one voice here.
So, again, I'll state that I'm okay moving forward from my standpoint, but I also understand that I don't get to make a motion here on this. Going back to our original, 1 and 2 items, we do need to make a recommendation to either approve, deny, or table the rezoning. So at this stage in the game, unless there's any other questions or comments, I would.
I can make that motion. For case number 22-021, Vista 45 rezone, I make a motion to recommend approval to the City Commission for the rezone of the parcels located at 4684, 4664, 4620, and 4568 Lake Michigan Drive Northwest from AA, C1, and C4 to CPUD and RPUD2 in accordance with the legal descriptions and zoning exhibit dated 7/5/22 for the Vista 45 PUD based on the following findings. The property cannot be reasonably used under its present zoning classification. The proposed use is compatible with other zoning and land uses in the area. It would not be more appropriate to add the proposed use to the existing district as a permitted use or by special use permit rather than allow a rezoning. The range of uses permitted in the proposed zoning district are compatible with the area. Development trends in the area are consistent with the requested rezoning. Uses in the proposed zoning district are equally or better suited to the area than those in the current zoning district. The proposed rezoning is consistent with the City of Walker master plan. The proposed rezoning does not constitute spot zoning. The proposed use can be adequately served by public water and sewer, and the requested rezoning will not have a negative impact on the health, safety, and welfare of the community.
Second that.
Okay, we have a motion on the table and we have support. Any comments or questions on that? There was a lot of items that were in that. Do we have any discussion on some of those items? Seeing that there is none. All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Let the record note that we have Steve opposing. Okay, the next item is for the PASP. And again, multiple things, questions, comments on that that we've had. Can I entertain a motion to either approve, table, or deny? We will have to have something.
I'll make a motion for case 22-021 to table the PASP approval request for the 217 unit multifamily housing development, 6-acre future residential development area, and 12 commercial outlots for the Vista 45 planned unit development located at 4684, 4664, 4620, 4568 Lake Michigan Drive Northwest per the plan set last revision dated 7/5/22 based on the findings below. The plan does not adequately define the uses proposed in the 6-area future residential area. The property does not have adequate access to public streets. The plan contains several areas where clarification has not yet been provided in terms of the following: minimum dimensional standards, setbacks, landscape buffer widths, minimum tree spacing width, cross-access easement width minimum lot size, CPUD, tree clearing limits, and signage for interior access of CPUD lots.
Okay, we have a motion on the table by Steve.
Second.
We have a second by Joe. Normally we don't do this, but I do feel like it's fair to the applicant to make note. Are there any specific items that we want to make sure are getting incorporated into this in the event that this is tabled?
I feel
like to see-
we need some time for
Hold
the.
on.
I'm
Okay,
sorry.
Go ahead, Joe.
Go ahead, I'm sorry. Go
Go ahead, Joe.
ahead. I feel this is so quick. We need to, as I say, I just got this Friday, and I think we need some time for the, get out there and some time to pass. We've passed the zoning.
Scott?
More specifically, I'd like to see some clarification on the single-family portion of the project. It was pretty, there wasn't really anything there, so I'd like to see what the applicants had in mind for that.
Any other questions, comments?
I mean, there are things I'd like to see, but I think I'm a one-off in this instance, and I'm not necessarily the person that should be driving the entire discussion. If it seems like others are comfortable with some of the layout aspects, I think that there probably should be a look at the housing styles just to better comply with the master plan. I think that's a big concern and a very real one, but that's where I think it's hard for us to provide directive in such a distinct manner, because as developers, it's kind of their right to propose what they want to move forward with, and then our prerogative to evaluate it.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I might add that it'd be probably direction on if these couldn't be public roads, how do you feel about the private? Because I think you heard in the presentation that they believe that the private roads would be fine as well, and that's a pretty prominent part of what needs to be resolved.
Yeah, in regards to that, I'm okay with that being private in the event that it can't be public. I think that there's a way to make that happen. Any other thoughts on that?
I should mention that in my suggested motion to approve, the public roads should be made, one of the conditions is that the public roads would be private if the public access can't be secured.
I think that meets what we're trying to achieve here. Because if we can get public roads, that's the preference, but.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
And my biggest thing would be is trying to get closer to the original master plan in terms of what we were looking for. But again, they brought this to us, and we can only vote on what they have. Okay, we have a motion and support on the table. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, the project is tabled at this stage in the game. Thank you. Okay, that concludes the items that are on our agenda tonight. Any staff updates at this point?
I believe Scott has an update on Tom.
Yeah, I talked to Tom's daughter earlier this week, and as you know, he had some difficulty during some back surgery, ended up having kind of a mild heart attack. He got through fine, cognitively he's in great shape, but he's really struggling, I think, with getting around. And then unfortunately, I think it was about a week ago, 2 weeks ago, he had an infection, had to go back into the hospital. So he got out of that, he's doing great, he's back home, and he's getting ready to start rehab at Mary Free Bed again. If it's any indication of how good he's doing, he does some moonlighting for the Coopersville-Marne Railroad, and he's already sending me emails about that. So he's as rambunctious as ever. He's probably watching right now. So I think he's doing good. Probably love to hear from you if you have a chance to send him a note. He loves doing this, he loves what he does, and I'm sure he misses it.
Any other updates?
You did a good job.
Yes, you did. I'm going on vacation.
What? How could you do that?
Excited about
How
that.
could you do that?
I'm taking an actual vacation. Of course, I have to plan around planning commission meetings, but we are still filling up our agendas. I could have mentioned this earlier, but I just didn't have a chance. But you know, if we end up having to have a special meeting, I've put that out there for the Vista 45 folks to help, you know, try to keep them on track. We've already held the public hearing, and so we're not, you know, subject to the noticing requirements like the 15-day thing, but requirement by law. So just wanted to put that out there, and if you might be interested, I'll check to see what your availability might be if they want to do something like that. Otherwise, I mean, the next meeting is on August 3rd. We have a full agenda. We have the sign code coming up. That one will be on the August 17th agenda. And yeah, just more industrial stuff, more commercial stuff. We haven't really heard back from the car wash people yet to see where they're at with wanting to, you know, tweak their design to make it so that they're not having stacking on Westtown Service Drive. We'll be considering the Lewis Farms PASP. They're rezoning again from mixed use PUD to IPUD and CPUD. And so, yeah, just more multifamily. Have not really heard back from the River Ridge Townhome folks in a while. They're still kind of pondering Frank's watermelon plan that he put out there, and as a suggestion, I call it the watermelon plan because of the colors. But you know, if you remember what that plan looked like, it kind of centered most of the buildings right at Center Drive to kind of preserve most of that area. And they're still looking into whether or not that different product type would be feasible for what they want to get out of the project. So it's been kind of quiet on that end. Yeah, the Lincoln Country Club redevelopment is getting very close to starting work.
They went through and cut all the grass. Took them about 3 days, but they came through with a high-low with a great big scissor, cut it all down.
How tall was it?
It was getting 4 feet.
Oh my gosh.
The weeds, yeah. So they came through and did it. Probably about 3 days it took them.
Wow, that's some thick grass.
Weeds.
But yeah, I mean, just we're not slowing down.
What about the school system handling all these new people? Kennel Hills handle all this? I mean, I know we've talked about this in the past. We haven't really brought it up in a while.
So if you were to ask the schools for a statement on like what they felt, how they felt about added population or more units, their standard response is usually, you know, it's our responsibility to make sure that every student in the district receives an equitable education. And so the schools are just another one of those agencies that responds to development. So when more people are moving into an area, the schools have an obligation to make sure that they have space for more students.
And in my experience dealing with school funding, schools have historically said we are hoping to retain more students and add students to our school, and they have been less vocal about concerns about accommodating all of the students that they have.
Yep. Each student gives them a certain amount of dollars, and so they you know.
So this would be Granville, wouldn't it? This would be Granville School.
Yep.
We're going through this in Grand Rapids Township too, where I live, and I don't think we have quite as many apartments, but it's almost. We probably have 700 or 800 compared to 1,000 proposed here, and all the apartment developers have said, you know, virtually zero students, don't worry about it. But I think when you get to look at exactly how it lays out, there are some students and there is an impact. But you know, that's another head that gets counted when it comes to time for passing out the funding, and the schools just have to grow with it.
That Lewis Farm's coming up, that has a gas station in it, and we approved about half a block over, a gas station in Ironwood, is that?
That's a good question.
Yes.
So I recently had a conversation with Jason Barris, who's, he's with AGO, American Gas and Oil, and he learned about, because I think he got the public hearing notice for the come and go thing across the street, and so, you know, that kind of got his attention, and he plans on coming back to the planning commission for sort of a renewal of their approval, because it's been so long, and for a little while we were like, you know, COVID's really put a wrench in stuff. We're willing to, you know, give some flexibility with having to renew some of these site plans, but this has been, you know, out there for like over 2 years, so they have to just come back for an approval, or update of their approval. So there's potential to have 2 gas stations on that corner.
We were kids, it was 4 corners, 4 gas stations. Now they're all
It's like,
7-Elevens.
yeah, Fuller in Michigan.
My other question is there is a special meeting for this. We have to have a quorum for us to, for that meeting really to be worthwhile.
Yes, it would be like a regular format, just like this. You're talking about if we held a special meeting.
Special meeting.
Yeah, it would be just like this, just probably on a different day.
To take any formal action, we would need to have a quorum.
Yeah, yep.
I totally agree though, Steve, with the master plan, what we saw. I really don't like the idea of West Town across the street. I'd like to see it a little bit different. I mean, what we saw in the master plan and planning, I mean, we saw some really cool ideas in that behind Meyer. And this just looked like West Town.
Yeah, well, it matched the color map in the future land use, but that's about the extent to which it matched what we had intended in the master plan. That's my interpretation.
That's why I read it up.
I did bring that statement that was in the master plan to them early on when we were meeting with the applicant. But, you know, we said we could try to make this work, you know, if you that could mimic what's shown in that West Standale vision.
Yeah, and I mean, probably could have said this then, but for my part, as long as it continues to have these same design elements, I'm probably still gonna take issue. And frankly, I think this, again, is a good subject for a work session, but again, those guys probably are not gonna feel as impassioned that direction, but just my take.
Okay, all right, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Thanks, guys.